Okay, so check out the slide and let me know if you can see the slide okay when I'm sharing my screen. Can you guys see that okay? Yeah, awesome. Okay. Okay, so we are going to be talking for about an hour today and diving into so many different things. So I would definitely recommend actually getting out a pen and paper because some of the stuff you're going to want to take notes because you'll be able to use it straight away when you start interviewing, when you start talking to your recruitment companies, when you're figuring out your taxes and your tax home. And so go ahead and grab something to write with as we dive into this. And so what we're going to talk about today on this newbie boot camp, specifically for travelers, and this one was for travel nurses, because there's a few things that are different between nurses and therapists. However, if you're an OT on here like Eva is, that's great because a lot of this stuff works just perfectly for either one of us. And so our rules are the same, even though the clinical parts are a bit different. So I'll be talking about how does this industry work anyway? Like, why does it get started? Why is there this traveling healthcare industry? What are your first steps on getting started as a traveler? We're going to dive into money, this inside scoop on what is the bill rate? How do you know if you're getting paid fair? What does our money packages look like? What should they look like when they get presented to us? I'm going to talk about the must-know tax home rule. So there's this rule that is the reason that we are actually all travelers and get paid like we do. It's really important to know these 3 action steps I'm going to tell you so you can feel confident and empowered that, yeah, I have a tax home and I can travel. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about, how do you find your ideal recruiter and company? There's so many out there. There's literally thousands of recruiters and hundreds of companies. So it's good to know, like, what does an ideal recruiter even look and sound like? And what are the red flags to look out for to make sure your recruiter's not doing those things? Does that sound good, everybody? And what's cool is this is live and interactive, and of course I could see you and talk to you, so please feel free to type and ask me questions and say yes and say no, because it makes it a lot more fun for everybody when you're talking. And then stay till the end. So at the very end, I'm going to have a live Q&A, so you can just kind of ask me any questions you have at all, and I'll happily answer them. And then I've also made a free gift for everyone who has come to the actual live event. So this is just for you guys, and I'll pop that up at the end for you guys. All right, so who in here has not heard of me, has no clue who I am? That would be really exciting, actually, if some of you guys in here have not heard about me. I am Laura, so I am a traveler of over 6 years now. I started traveling as a new grad, since I'm an occupational therapist, and we are able to travel as new grads. So this is actually the only industry I've ever done, and the only industry that I know, and I love it. I have been all over the country. And then I am definitely a traveler that does it for adventure. So you can see in some of these pictures, I always take 1 month or 2 months off a year to go backpack and go see some part of the world. So I really love traveling. And I had no clue this was an industry when I started out in school. And so when I got out of school and realized we could get paid to travel and this kind of flexibility and take control of our life industry that we could jump into, I was ecstatic. So I love the industry. And then 2 years ago, I started Nomadicare.com. So this is my way of giving back to the industry and helping the new people that are thinking about traveling and wondering how it works to help teach them. So some of the ways I do that are like these live webinars. Of course, if you have ever seen me in my Facebook group, I'm always doing videos and putting guides up in my Facebook group. And I can even put a link up to that group. So in case you guys aren't in it, you're welcome to join. And then I'm also the recruiter matchmaker. So one of the big things that I noticed when I was mentoring people and getting started is everyone was saying, well, how do I find a good recruiter? What does a good recruiter look like? And so I jumped into the world of interviewing recruiters, which proved to be a lot harder and more interesting and fun than I expected. And so my mission is to find the very best recruiters out there to be able to match them with new travelers who don't, are more in a vulnerable state. They don't know what they're supposed to get paid yet. They don't know what a tax home is yet. They're worried if they're doing it right. So I'm finding the recruiters that have the integrity and the knowledge and the passion to really lead us and create that win-win for the industry. So that is what I'm up to. And I couldn't find the link to my group while I'm doing this, but if anybody is in the Empowered Nurses and Therapists group, feel free to pop the link on for me. That would be so nice. Okay, so let's jump into the basics. So why is this even an industry? So how it works is wherever you're going to go work, whether it's a hospital or a clinic, whatever it is, they have a need to temporarily fill in for their staffing. And so if you can put yourself in a manager position, put yourself in their shoes, they might be in a desperate spot. Suddenly their census just rose really quickly, or it's a seasonal thing. They know their census rises just for the season, and it might drop back off. Maybe they just got in a new computer system. They need to train all their permanent staff, but they don't need to hire on a whole bunch of people for a long time, just temporarily. So if you're that person, you want to bring somebody in that knows what they're doing, that can come in and just kind of be that Band-Aid, grab the caseload, see patients, doesn't need too much hand-holding and training, because you just don't have time for that. You're not investing long-term into them because you're only hiring them for about 3 months. And you also don't really want to go through the process of going onto Indeed.com, Monster.com, and finding these people yourself. And so you're looking for people that are highly skilled. You're going to be paying top dollar for them to come in temporarily. And you don't want to go through that work yourself of, putting them on health insurance and any of that stuff. So you go through this middleman. And the middleman is what we call our recruitment company and our agency. So they talk to the companies and can say, hey, I need 2 nurses for 13 weeks in this unit. And they'll give them a little bit of information, like the shifts, hopefully the float policy, different information, so they can go back to their nurses and see who might be interested in working these jobs. And if you guys can just give me a shout out, if you can still hear me okay. When the chat gets quiet, I'm just start wondering, am I talking to myself? So just throw something up on that chat so I know that you guys can still hear me great. So anyway, so they go to the agency and they tell them what they need. Now, us on the other hand, we're these nurses and these, I'm a therapist, and these travelers that are thinking, okay, cool, next I want to go. Oh, thank you, Simon. Thanks, Patty. I appreciate that. Awesome. Thanks, Dawn. So for me, I know when I get back to the States, I'm going to go Southern California. So I'll go to my agencies and say, hey, what do you have in Southern California? And they'll go on their computers and look up what hospitals are asking for temporary needs in that area. And so remember that the power is really with us. When you go to an agency, if you're just getting started and you haven't talked to these agencies yet, just know we're the ones that are telling them where we want to go. And they have this computer that is full of different jobs. Some of them are exclusive jobs, meaning just their company has those jobs. And then a whole lot of them are also not exclusive jobs, meaning there's actually another middleman, which is called the VMS. And so a hospital might say, I'm just going to put my job in this VMS system. And then all these different agencies can all see the job. And so that way they are paying a bit of a fee to put it in the VMS system, but they're getting access to more talent and probably a faster job filling for them. So we would go to an agency, we'd tell them where we want to go. The more places we're open to, obviously the more opportunity we'll have. Not every single place is going to have a job at any given time. The industry kind of goes up and down, but it's been very consistent for a long time in that there are jobs out there, which is exciting. The other things to know is that 13-week assignments that's a standard assignment, but it doesn't mean it's the only thing you can do. There are times I know I only have 4 weeks to work before I have a trip or a wedding or something planned. And so I've negotiated plenty of contracts that are less than 13 weeks or even more than 13 weeks. And so just know that's just the standard amount is 13 weeks. And you cannot work in one region for more than a year. If you just fall in love, if I go to San Diego and just fall in love with San Diego and don't want to leave, as soon as I stay there for a year, that becomes my new tax home residence, because now I'm making all of my money from one area. So I'm not really a traveler anymore. And so the government's not going to give me all of these special benefits for being a traveler. And we'll talk more about tax homes later, so don't worry if that's kind of confusing. And then know that you have to have a tax home, which essentially does mean that you're going to be paying a rent or a mortgage in typically 2 places. There are a few exceptions, but I'm talking about in general, most of us out there are paying 2 rents. So yeah, we do get paid more money, but we also are paying double for our housing. And if at any time you guys have questions, feel free to pop them on over there. Okay, so first steps. Let's say you're just getting started and you're like, I know I want to travel. I know I was made for adventure. I just don't really know where to start. So you start out first and foremost by just talking to yourself and figuring out, where do you want to go? When do you want to go there? And why do you want to travel? So the where you want to go is important, because if you know the 3 top places that you're willing to travel to, the first thing you're going to do when you start talking to companies is ask them that basic, simple question. I want to go to these places, and this is my specialty. Do you have jobs in those places? Because if they don't have jobs where you want to go, that's easy to then just move on and talk to another company. And so the more specific you can get, the easier it is to find that perfect match for a company and for a recruiter. So you want to know where you want to go, and keeping in mind the more desirable places, like for me, San Diego, will be more challenging for me to find that dream job because it's going to be more competitive. And so I probably need to broaden that search and have a few other options in my back burner. And Lori just asked a great question, and it's about the tax home. She said, I don't pay rent. My house is paid for. Lori, that is amazing. And you have monthly expenses, of course. You've already done your due diligence and paid off your house. So absolutely, that is definitely still your tax home. So don't worry about that. There's other stipulations that make up a tax home, but as far as duplicating expenses, yeah, you got that one covered, girl. Okay, so what was I saying? Sorry, I got distracted with that one. But know where you want to go. Yep, and that way, just knowing that the more places and options you have, the more likely you can really find a job that pays what you want. Know when you want to go, and that's just to help figure out your timeline. You're going to start talking to recruiters 2 to 3 months before you want to start your job. Interviews could happen anywhere from 1 month to 2 weeks before the job starts. So it just helps you with your timeline. If you know you're not going to want to start traveling for a year, you don't need to start talking to companies yet. There's actually quite a high turnover rate in recruiters. So there's a chance that the recruiter you start talking to could have shifted positions, could have left the company. And then the industry changes so much. You could call now and ask if there's jobs in San Diego. And in 3 months, that will be different. And in 6 months, it'll be different. And in a year, it'll definitely be different. And so that just helps you know the timeline of things. And then knowing why you travel. And this is actually really, really important. It's for you to talk to yourself and really think about, what is it for you that makes you want to travel? And the reason I think this one is getting more and more important is because of the trend I'm seeing in the industry of people comparing to each other. And while the Facebook forums and everything are amazing, I love them, and I think they're really beneficial, there's also the downside of being able to see what everybody else is up to and how much everybody else is making. And unless we feel very solid in why we're traveling, what our life journey is, then we could have the tendency of reading those things and thinking that should be our life journey. And so knowing your why is just another way to have more happiness and joy in your journey. And so for me, I know my why is location. There are places I really want to go see. And so I'll take less money to go to places like San Diego because I know they're competitive. And I want that experience of 3 months waking up on that beach and having that experience. But that means when I look on the forums, if someone's telling me how much they're making in this, town in Texas or wherever they are in a place that is less desirable, I'm not going to get jealous and be like, oh, why am I not making that? Because I totally get why I'm traveling. So that might seem pretty basic, but I do see a lot of people being confused about what they should and should not have. And I think it comes down to them just wanting it all. But there's always going to be a give and take. If you're traveling for the location, then you can't be traveling for the money. If you're traveling just for the money, cool. When you talk to the recruiter, you can say to the recruiter, where are the best pay packages? And they can just tell you that, but you might not get those prime locations. So it's just a great way to manage expectations. And of course, expectations is like the fastest way for us to feel grumpy or for us to feel happy. Deciding what you need is really important. So as you're interviewing these companies, you want to make sure their benefits match up with what you need. So it's just taking a self-assessment on, do I need medical insurance from these companies? Or am I going to have my own medical insurance? Do I want to start doing 401k investing with them? Or am I not planning on traveling long enough for that? So I'm not going to get vested anyway, so I don't need it. Will I be finding my own housing, or will they be doing my housing? If they're doing my housing, I need to make sure they have a good housing department. I need to ask them if they do extended stays or if they do gated apartments. So these are the kinds of things I would be asking after I decide what it is I need, and that can help me rule out companies and find that company that's really a best match for me. So after that, you've decided where, when, and why. You figured out what you need. You have that list. Awesome. Then you want to look into and figure out if you have a real tax home, which we're going to dive into in just a little bit. But a real tax home is seeing how you're going to get paid. Is all of your money going to be taxed, or are you going to have a tax home, which means some of your money can be given to you in tax-free stipends? And then with that, you're going to start your paper trail right there. And that paper trail is going to be making sure you have a lease and proof of paying for this tax home. And then once you get to that timeline, that 2 or 3 months before you start, that's when you're going to start interviewing and picking out your recruiters. And so you really, really want to find this great match of recruiter that has your back, that knows what they're doing, that you feel like is someone you can trust and ask questions to, because as you go through this journey and these ups and downs, that's going to be your rock in this journey. So that would be like a top advice, is to make sure you really find someone that you bond with and trust. And of course, that their company has the benefits you need. So you'll start interviewing and narrow it down to about 2 recruiters, maybe 3, depending on your specialty and depending on how specific your needs are. And then once you start interviewing and you've found a recruiter you're bonding with, don't hold off on giving that paperwork to them. This industry moves crazy fast, and so they need your paperwork. And it does 2 things. Once you've talked to a recruiter, you built that bond, you've asked them the questions, they've answered you, they've proven they followed through, then you want to kind of show them that you also can be a great traveler for them. Because just like us not wanting to get screwed over by recruiters and not wanting to have a bad recruiter match, they also get worried about us just talking to them and pulling information to go feed it to another company, to pin them against each other, to waste all their time when really we know that we're going to go work with this other company. Things like that happen to recruiters all the time. And so by us giving our paperwork to them, as soon as we realize, yep, this is a recruiter I want to be part of my team, they don't have to be the only recruiter on your team, but if they're one of them, then by giving them your paperwork quickly, it shows them that, yeah, this traveler is serious about me, they're going to get their paperwork in, I'm going to enjoy working with them as well. So you're showing you're part of the team. And what happens is I've done a lot of tours of different recruitment companies. And so I get to sit next to some of the recruiters and see how it works. And it's been amazingly eye-opening. And what I see is the recruiters, of course, only have a certain amount of time in their day as well. And they're trying to get more travelers on their team and all of this. But they do have a list of travelers that are their top travelers that listen to them, that call them back, that get their paperwork in, and those are the ones that they're going to be constantly scanning for the best jobs for, because you've built up that trust with them. So you do want the trust to go back both ways. So sometimes travelers will hold on to that paperwork like it's their poker chips. They just don't want to let them go. They feel like it's bad. But as soon as you know that recruiter could be great, go ahead and get the resume in, go ahead and get the skills checklist in. You're going to be applying for licenses in the states you know you want to travel to. And that can vary. Some states for me have been a few weeks. Some have been several months for me. If you have a compact state, lucky you, I don't get that as a travel OT. So, nice job. But yeah, so you're going to look up for your state license board, how long does that license take, and start applying for that. That's something that you're going to do on your own. And then once you take a job, the company may reimburse you for that license, but you can go ahead and get that started without a company. And then start an online file from the get-go. That will save you so much in the long term. So an online file could be like a Dropbox folder or an Evernote folder, and you're just going to start from the very beginning to keep all of your paperwork in there. So I have a separate Dropbox folder that has just my skills checklist and resume and those basic paperworks. So if I do start talking to a new company I really like that has a job I want, I can just like right click and share that folder with them, and it's so simple. So I'm not trying to dig up or write a new resume each time I talk to a new company. And then I also keep in there written references, names of all the jobs I've had and their locations, names of all my addresses I've had, things that I would very easily forget being as transient as we are. All right, any questions about that, guys? So I'm going to kind of go through these quickly because I want to go into the pay and the tax homes. But just in general, thinking about what makes an awesome traveler if you're just getting started, the big things are going to be that adaptability. So just know going into it, things change all the time as a traveler. Like you're pretty much signing up for a life of change and adventure, which is great, but it's not the easy journey. Like I don't really meet travelers who are signing up for this because it's the easier way of life. It's not. It's new coworkers, it's new styles of documentation, new ways of treatment. All the time, adaptability, like you could get a job and then it could fall through, and then you could get another job and you're like, oh, where am I going to be? Am I going to be in Oregon, in Seattle? And so it's a lot of walking into the unknown, which is beautiful for self-growth. It's beautiful for an adventurous and full life. But you do need to have this adaptability or it's going to be very stressful. Open-mindedness. So that's huge for two reasons. For one, it's huge for the cultures, the food, the self-growth. When you're open-minded and you go into a place, you can really enjoy that stuff more. You can go into it more like this childlike curiosity of like, what do they eat here? What are their beliefs here? How do they talk? And just like enjoy that kind of open-minded adventure versus always comparing. Like, well, we do it like this. This isn't as good. And especially in the clinical side, when you go into a setting, you truly, truly might come from a better hospital than the hospital you're going to. And you can see, like, they're not doing things as well as you guys did back in the other one. And so travelers might want to help and, like, literally show them new techniques. But it's a really quick way of making people dislike you really quick. Because then you have to go back and put yourself in their shoes. You're supposed to be a Band-Aid. You're supposed to come in and hustle and see the patients and make things easier. And from the company perspective, they're paying you a lot of money to do that, but they're not paying you to be a consultant. And they're not asking you to come in and like change their systems and tell them and be kind of like this spy of all the other hospitals you've been to and report to them. They just really need you to help their place run smoothly so they can get through whatever hurdle they're going through. So just keeping that in mind and thinking of yourself more as someone of service versus as someone of expertise and consulting expertise. Confidence is huge. You will hit the ground running. Orientation times can change and can be just from a day or two. I know as an OT, sometimes my orientation is just barely a tour and a patient list. Nurses, I think you guys get a little bit more than we do, but still, regardless, it's not going to be what you would expect from a permanent job. So you need to have that confidence of your clinical skills. You guys are absolutely amazing, and you do a lot of life-saving measures, and you want to go in knowing no one's holding your hand and mentoring you. So to have that confidence going in that you can do those techniques, which is really important in the interview too, to talk openly and candidly about what they expect of you. What kind of patients are there? What kind of tools do they use? What are they expecting you to be performing? So you know that going in, and everyone, patients in the hospital and yourself, stays safe. Another piece of confidence is just knowing how to say no. Sometimes saying no or saying I don't know can be really scary. And so you need to have the confidence to know it's okay not to know everything and be able to say that when you need to so that everyone stays safe as well. Self-motivation to learn. Again, no one's holding your hand. And it's funny because sometimes we like crave this life of freedom. Like we go through our whole life of going to school and having parents and everyone tells you what to do. And then as a travel nurse, as a travel therapist, as a traveler, we suddenly have such freedom of choice. But with all that choice, like, it can kind of be fatiguing to have so many choices all the time. You're like, I don't know what's right for my life. So, and same, like you go into the hospitals and the clinics, and there needs to be this kind of inner drive of self-motivation to, if you don't know a technique, to be able to go home and study it. And if you don't know how to get, to the grocery store in these places, you can have this self-motivation to learn the town, a self-motivation to learn yourself, to go somewhere and try out new things. Those are going to make an awesome traveler. And then gratitude. I can guarantee to you that something while you're traveling is going to go different than you expected. I guarantee it. I guarantee that even if you interview the best you can, you ask all the questions, you've looked at the pictures, you asked on the forums, you read your contract, you'll get there and something will be different than you expected. And thank God for that, right? We're not traveling because we want our lives to unfold exactly how we have it in our mind. That would be so boring. But that being said, one of the fastest ways to change yourself from an unhappy to a happy state is literally just changing those expectations to gratitudes. And so whatever's happening, just be grateful for the experience, whether it's a learning experience like, oh, gee, I didn't know I was going to get to learn how to change a tire today. Fun. But in general, if you can maintain that kind of attitude on this unknown world of walking into traveling nurse life, you will have such an amazing experience if that can be your mindset as you go into each thing. It'll just feel like you're getting paid to just learn and grow and see this world if you can maintain that attitude. So those are my biggest tips, and I would just say, if you're on here, if you're feeling called to travel, don't let fear get in the way of that. Like, all of these skills are learned skills. Like, we're not born as kids with solid clinical skills, with the confidence that you might have today. These are things that you learn and you work on each day. And so don't feel like, oh, I'm pretty type A, I don't know if this is for me. If you're feeling called to do this, like, don't let this stop you. These are just things that will make it way easier. All right, so why it is amazing. Show me the money. Yes, we do get paid more as travelers, and we'll dive into why that is. So we'll talk about money a little bit more later. But yeah, you have the opportunity to make a lot more money, and that's so exciting. And you get to explore new clinical settings. There is adventure, so much self-growth and development. It's amazing. No more politics at the job. So if we have permanent jobs that we've been at too long, you just know too much about too many people's business, and people complain, and this manager is like this, and it just can get really old. But now we get to be the fresh face and the helper and the person that comes in, and we don't have to deal with any of that gossip and politics, and that is so nice all on its own. And then my favorite, at least one of my favorites, is the flexibility of the time off. So I can work 3 assignments, and then I can take a few months off, and if I saved up, and I can go backpack, and I can travel, I'm able to go, ask for time off in my contract and go to weddings and see different events that if I was in a permanent job where they only give you 2 weeks off a year, and it's really hard to get those in a row, I don't have the same freedom and choice and flexibility in my life. And there's nothing more important to me than having that choice in what I spend my time doing. And then why it's not all sunshine, which we've talked about some of these, but you need to hit the ground running and just know that's an expectation. You're not going to get paid time off, or you're not going to get sick time. So when we're in the permanent jobs, we get 2 weeks off, but those 2 weeks are paid typically. And in this world, you've got to save up on your own and save up to have that paid time off. And if you're sick for a day, you're not getting paid for that sick time. So it's more of a job where you get paid for the hours you work. So keep that in mind as you're doing your financial planning. Housing. So finding housing every three months to 6 months, if you extend it, it is really time consuming. And I found it's actually gotten a little bit harder to find housing than it did when I started in the price range I wanted. But at the same time, there is the flip side of it's gotten a little bit easier. It just seems to cost a bit more with the Airbnbs and the HomeAways. There's house sitting you can do, and there's Craigslist, as long as you know the scams. But the point is, it can be time consuming if you're not fine using the company to use their housing. Why would you not always use the company housing? It's because you get paid more and you can have more cash in your pocket if you find your own housing. So I've always found my own housing. I've always found a way, but sometimes I end up in housing that I just laugh at later. So that can be time consuming. Contracts do get canceled sometimes, and so there's this unpredictability nature about travel. Phone interviews, a lot of it is on you to ask the right questions. So I know when I just got started and I had my very first phone interview, guys, I was a new grad. I didn't know anything about this industry at all yet. I was just so excited at the possibility of getting paid to travel. And I had my first phone interview, and I was like pumped for it. And the person calls me and I answer. And the whole interview lasted like 5 minutes. And they asked me, if I passed my boards, when I could start, what time off I needed, like just such logistical questions, nothing about my clinical skills, nothing about their hospital, like what I would expect. And I was just stunned, and we got off the phone, and I seriously thought they hated me. And I called my recruiter, and I was like, I'm so sorry, I think I blew it. And he was like, oh, no, Laura, they offered you the job. And I was so confused, and it took me a while to realize a lot of times these places are so desperate for someone to come in. They're not really trying to find the best clinical skills. They're just trying to find someone to come help them for 3 months because they're desperate. And so then I realized as I went along the way, so much of it is on me to make sure I'm asking them the right questions. So I took full ownership and responsibility over that. And I have this whole list of questions I'll ask to make sure my clinical skills fit. They have the team I want to work on, what kind of patients I'm going to see, what kind of expectations they have for my productivity and time. So I now pretty much lead a lot of the interviews. And then health insurance and 401k benefits. So health insurance a lot of times is through the companies, these middleman recruitment companies, which sounds great, except this is another way to be a little bit trapped in a company. So if I have health insurance with company A, but company B has the job I want, because not all companies have the same jobs, now I have to switch over health insurance all the time, which I don't like. I don't like having gaps in not having health insurance. And some of these recruitment companies, they don't have, their insurance doesn't start until like day 30 or the second month. And so then all of a sudden I just don't have insurance for a month. And working in the healthcare industry, we all know how scary that can feel. So for me, I get my own health insurance. And so that way I'm covered the whole year and don't have to have those fears. But that's a downside if you're trying to switch between their health insurance. And then 401k benefits is a similar thing where, yes, a lot of these companies offer 401k benefits, which is great, but it's vested after a certain amount of time. So it's another way they kind of trap you. And I don't think it's like mean, but you have to stay with that company for a long time to get that benefit. And so you don't have the flexibility of moving around between companies, which also means you have less opportunity. Okay, so we're going to transition into tax homes. So tax homes. And Simon has a question. Thanks for asking. What is the easiest way to find your own health insurance? So as we all know, health insurance is kind of changing right now, but as it stands, where we still have the Affordable Care Act, that is what I use. And so the easiest way for me to do it, and it's been so beneficial for me, is during what they call their open enrollment. So the first few months of the year, I think it might end at the end of January. You can enroll in your home state, in your tax home state for insurance. And so that's what I do. I get an insurance company that will allow me to travel around to different states. And so not all of them do this. So I actually get them on the phone. I tell them, what I'm up to, what my job is. And so what they typically find is when I'm home at my tax home is when I'll go to a primary care physician. It's when I'll do my annual checkups and different things like that. But when I'm away, my insurance allows me to go to any clinic that's like a critical care, not an emergency room, but just like the the ones that are all around town, the critical care, I can go into those just for $20 anytime, anywhere across the country. And so having that, I knew if something happened, I can always go to a hospital. I can always go to a critical care unit to get medication if I need to, and I'm covered. But I had to talk to them and ask them and make sure I found one that worked out of network. So that was the easiest way for me, and it's worked great, and I have felt confident with it. Okay, so the tax home rule, and this is just a disclaimer, this is from a non-CPA or any kind of tax expert. Yes, I have done this for 6 years. I've gone to so many courses. I'm good friends with Joseph Smith from traveltax.com. He is the expert. So I am going to give you the basics and things that are very important for you to know, but also understand there's a lot more to it than this. So if you have specific questions, there are tax experts that would be thrilled to help you, but it's so important for you to at least know these basics. So the basics is, as a traveler, we have 2 ways we can get paid. One, we can have a tax home, and that's how we get these tax-free stipends and tax-free reimbursements. Or we can travel without a tax home, and then everything that we make will be taxed. So it's just like being a permanent employee. And so whether or not we qualify to get tax-free stipends or tax-free income, it just depends on if we're working away from a tax home. And to work away from a tax home, of course, we have to have one. Then the question is, what is a tax home? So most people have a very obvious tax home because most people will work from one place and live in one place. So that's like what our recruiters do. They might live in Texas, drive to work, go to work there, make their money there, and drive back home. So that means they get number 1 on this list. They work, they make most of their money from one location. But we are travelers. So we are not making most of our money from one location in any given year. And so all of a sudden that rule doesn't apply to us. And so the IRS has some different rules for us. And so how they view us, you can kind of think of it like we're on a business trip. So if you're on a business trip, you do have expenses at home, you have a place that you go back to, and you go away, and you're able to write off a lot of those expenses because you're on a business trip. So this is kind of similar. They just give us the money in advance. But in order for this to happen, they need proof that our living expenses are duplicated. So if we're just traveling around and we don't actually have a home anywhere, then we just have everything taxed. But if we do have a home somewhere that we are paying rent at, then they're going to give us these tax-free stipends to help us offset that we have to pay rent twice. So living expenses are duplicated. And the most important thing to know here is that you have to be paying fair market value. And so that would mean you would hop on Craigslist and see what are other people paying in this area to live here. Because if you do, knock on wood, end up audited one day and the government says, all right, show us your living expenses. And you just show them like a $50 internet bill or just like a $50 check to your mom each month, that won't count. That's not fair market value. And so you might as well not be paying anything there because they're not going to take that as duplicated living expenses. So you're going to be paying fair market value somewhere. And then number 3, the other thing we can't do is we cannot abandon our home. So if we have a tax home and we have a home, well, then the IRS is saying, well, that means you're going to go back to it sometimes. Otherwise, it's not your home. And so the ways that we can prove we're not abandoning our home is by going home. And so about 30 days a year seems safe. And it does not have to be consecutive. But you do need to go home. And then you also need to have paper proof that you still live there. So paper proof could be like your driver's license is still connected to that house. Your voter's card, your car registration, your W-2 forms, things like this should all still have your home address on there. And your driver's license is very important because if you move somewhere, like I'm really I think a California girl at heart. So when I first moved to San Francisco for the first time, I wanted a phone number, I wanted a driver's license that said San Francisco on it. But had I gone and gotten that driver's license for fun that said San Fran, well, now all of a sudden I'm in the system of that state. And now that state is going to want to claim me as their tax resident to get money, just like my Texas place is. And so it's really important to keep your driver's license back at your tax home. Now, a few things I want to dive a little bit deeper into because these are common questions and common misconceptions. Number one, how far away do you have to go? So let's say I have a tax home in Texas. I don't know if you guys can hear all this stuff in the background. I'm outside in Thailand doing this, and there's these random cars with loudspeakers on the top of them that will drive by and just blast. I don't even know what they're saying because it's in Thai. I don't know if it's political statements or what it is, but they'll just drive by real slow and blast out their statements. It's so funny. So how far away do you have to go? So if you are in your home, some companies, and I've heard this from companies, like many of them still say this, they'll say you just have to go 50 miles away and then you're fine. That's all the government wants. So this is definitely a myth and definitely not written anywhere. What do they actually say? What the government actually says is that you have to go far enough away that it is obvious that you would need a second home to go there. So 50 miles for many people and in many states is commutable. There are places I could have worked in Texas that, are just those big open highways that I can go 70 down, and 50 miles I could easily go there and back and listen to my podcast and radio. So that very well might not be obvious need for another home. So what the government is looking for is that, yes, you are far enough away that you need a second home, so you're not doing this just for fun. And so what that means is also gray. There is no black and white answer of how far is the right amount to go. So it's kind of this common sense thing. So you can just take that for what it is, but the companies that say the 50-mile rule, they use that because their company uses that rule. So maybe the company just wanted some kind of way for the recruiter to talk about this. So the company's rule is we won't take anybody less than 50 miles. But if we got audited, the auditors are not going to care what our company told us. They go by their own rules, and we have to go by their rules. Number two, can you use your mom and dad's home or your friend's home as your tax home? Yes, you can. As long as all your paperwork is tied to there and that's your tax home, you absolutely can. You just want to treat it in a way that you would have proof if you got audited that you are paying there. And so you would want to write up a proper lease. You can just go on Google and find a lease, write it up, and have both of you sign it and say what the agreement is. And when you pay them, just pay them in a way that it's provable. So you can show that it got paid each month. Don't pay it in cash or anything like that. And pay it by a check. Pay it by, electronic transfer. And so it's obviously provable you paid them the fair market value each month and the lease to show that you guys started that. How long can you stay in one region? So as a traveler, we can stay in a region for 1 year. Once we hit that 1 year mark, then all of a sudden that place becomes our tax home because remember, now we're hitting rule number one. We work and we make most of our money from one area. So then the government does not want to give us tax-free money for doing that. So we just suddenly switched where our tax home was. So as travelers, if you want to make the tax-free money, you do need to keep moving and not stay somewhere for over a year. And then, what is a region anyway? So this is important to know too. So a region is similar to question number one about how far away can you go. When I was working in New Hampshire is like up in New England where the states are all so close together. So I could be living in New Hampshire and then I could drive 45 minutes to Boston and work at a hospital in Boston and then drive back to my cheaper place in New Hampshire each night. And that was easy. So let's say I'm loving it and I stay there for almost a year. And now I need to switch regions in order to not have that turn into my tax home. And so what I have to do is kind of draw a circle all the way around where my home is in New Hampshire. And I can't work anywhere that is reasonable for me to commute from there. So there are places that I could have driven to even in Vermont that would have been close enough for me to commute to. So even though my first job was in Boston and my second job was in Vermont, I still couldn't do that. It would still turn to my tax home in New Hampshire because that is all within a reasonable commute. And so it's really about you actually need to pick up and move somewhere where I actually need another house. I'm not just pretending like I need another house. All right, does that make sense to you guys? Are you still with me? Let me hear some yeses out there so I know you guys can still hear me and you're with me, and let me know if you have any questions. Okay, so now let's talk about the fun world of pay. Pay, here's what I heard. When I first got started in this industry, I heard about it for the first time just from one of those booths at like a trade show. And all over the booth it said, free, free, free. It was like free housing, free license, free CEUs, free paid time off, all of these things. And I was like, oh my God, like what's the catch? And they're like, no, there's no catch. It's all free. Okay, so they kind of tricked me at the beginning, but you have come to this webinar, so you will not be fooled. Nothing is free. Hey, Patty, thank you so much for answering. Thanks, Lori. Awesome. Okay, so let's figure out how we get paid. It looks like these slides are a little jumbled up with the words, but don't worry. Know how you get paid. So for those of you who do know me, you know I have a love for coffee. So I'm going to make this analogy a coffee analogy true to myself. So that big old coffee pot over there, that is the total pot of money. That is everything that the hospital is giving our agency. And then we're going to think about what we make our pay rate as a cup of coffee. So here's how it works. There's the hospital. They're the ones that are like, oh my gosh, we need someone to come in and fill in for 13 weeks. And so they're going to have an amount that they're willing to pay the agency or the recruitment company. Same thing. That's what they call the bill rate. So if you hear the bill rate, that's what they're talking about. The bill rate is the number that they're paying for every single hour that we work. It could be $60, $80, $100. They range like crazy. There's not a set bill rate at all. A lot of times it depends on their location, on how big the need is. Is it a strike rate? There's all kinds of things. And so even one hospital could change their bill rate from month to month. And that's like a secret thing. Like we don't get to know what the bill rate is most of the time. So the hospital is paying a bill rate, the hourly rate to the agency. Now the agency is obviously a company, just like a hospital is, just like we are. They need to make their money too. So the money goes to them first. So they're going to pour that money into their own coffee cup first and take what they need. And then whatever is left over in the bill rate, that's going to be our pay rate. That's what they're pouring into our coffee cup. And so the thing to know is that all of that free stuff, that's really coming out of your coffee cup. It's not coming out of that total amount of the bill rate. So that's really important to know. So that way you know what you can negotiate and what you can ask for, because it's really your money. So the bill rate times our contracted hours. That's how we figure out what the total number of money is in our pot. So let's say the bill rate's $60 and we're contracted in the contract to work 36 hours a week. So we've got $2,160 is the total amount. Then we multiply that by the 13 weeks that's in our contract. So we have a little over $28,000. That's our total money in the big pot. So they're going to take their share first. And then we have so then they take their share, great, and then they pour into our cup of coffee our pay rate. So now we have our cup of coffee. Yummy. And the thing is, we actually get to decide how we take that coffee. So for me, I love a good latte. But for someone else, they just love it black. Someone else wants the mocha cappuccino. It's all good. But the only way to know how we can even ask for a coffee to be made is to know what are the options. So let's look at our coffee menu. What's in our cup? Starting out, this is how pay rates should be broken down for us, because this is all the things that are inside of our pay rate. We have the small piece, and so obviously, guys, in this example, I'm assuming you have a tax home, because if you did not have a tax home, this stuff doesn't matter. It's all going to be taxed. This is broken down differently for us because a lot of it's not taxed. So the very first thing is the taxable income, and that's going to be a small portion of our pay. And then we have the stipend, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the range of that number and things to think about with that number on the next slide. The next things are what we call the stipends. You might also hear of those called the per diems or the reimbursements. They all mean the same thing. There's two different things. There's the housing stipend. So if you did not take the housing of the company, you'll get cash money that is not taxed to help you pay for your second home since you have a tax home. Now, where do they get this money? Like, how do they pick out this number? there is a website that you can look at, they can look at. It's open to the public. It's called the GSA.gov. And on this website, you can type in the area code that you'll be moving to, and the government has already said what the maximum amount of a reimbursement that you can get by going to any location, because the cost of living changes everywhere you go. So it's going to be different depending on the zip code you put in. So the company can look at that, and out of the bill rate, they can put your taxable income aside, and then they can put money in the stipends, the housing stipend and the meals and incidentals. Those are two different numbers, and they're two different numbers on the GSA.gov. And those are non-taxed, so that's great. And if you find a house that's cheaper than the stipend they give you, awesome, you get to keep that money. And with the meals and incidentals, this is great too, because this is a way for us to get non-tax money to help us pay for our meals and incidentals, and we do not have to keep receipts for tax time, which is wonderful. They're also going to put in our cup travel pay, which is also not taxed. So that's the money they're going to give you to get from point A to point B to get to that job. Our medical benefits is one of the benefits that goes into our cup. So for me, I find my own medical insurance, and there are companies out there that will then pay me a little bit more per hour because I'm not taking that benefit from them, and that will help me pay for my travel insurance. So I only work with companies then that are a good fit for me that will pay me more because I have my own insurance. The physicals and the background checks, that's money that comes out of our cup. It doesn't come out of their cup. License reimbursement, so all these things that they're saying free, remember, it's not. This is an our cup. So they've just chosen how to spend our cup, because this is ways they could spend it tax-free. So it is a mutually beneficial thing. They just kind of market it where they say it's free, but it's really not. CEUs, we can negotiate to get continued education credits in our cup. And then bonuses, paid time off, anything else that the company is labeling as free is not really free. All of this is different things that make up our pay. So then this is where you get to make some decisions for yourself about how you want to get paid. So number one, you have to think about what your stance is on taxable income. Companies have a huge range of what they're willing to pay us for that. And how it works is the lower that number goes, two things happen. One, we have more money that can go into our tax-free parts of our pay. So it seems good at the surface. I know when I started, I was like, well, cool, like I want more non-taxed money. But what it does is on their end, it may make them more likely to get audited because they're not doing things by the book on their end. But that may or may not affect us. But it's just something to note that it has been said that the lower they go, the more likely they are to get audited. And then if their company goes under an audit, some of their travelers might get picked out to get audited as well. But the thing I think to really think about is where you're at in life. So if you're making $12, $14 an hour taxable, just remember anything you try to do, let's say you want to get a car loan, a credit card, you're thinking of buying your own house, things that you need to take out loan money for, they're going to be looking at the taxable part of your income only. So it makes it a lot harder to make these big financial moves if you need to take out credit, if that's what you have. And so just keep that in mind. And then depending on if you're going to be a career traveler or not, this also eventually will affect your Social Security, because the government is only going to pay you later when you retire a percentage of your taxable income, not your reimbursements. And same thing, if you got injured on the job, then these short-term injury benefits that you have, they're only going to pay you 66% of your taxable income, which is like nothing if you're choosing to make $13 an hour. So it's just things to keep in mind and decide what you want. Do you want to take the risk of having the really low number, or do you want to do things a little bit more conservatively? You get to decide that yourself. Stipends. It's important to know the maximum number on the GSA.gov. It's so great because we don't have to keep receipts as long as we stay under the max. And so if there's a bill rate that is like amazing, well, that's great, but they cannot go over that maximum number from that website on our housing stipend or meals and incidental stipend. Otherwise, we have to save every receipt to prove it, which no thank you. So just make sure they're not going over that. Your recruiter should be doing that, but you can also check and make sure. Now, keep in mind, guys, they cannot always max that out. So if you look at that number and then you look at your pay rate and they are not able to max out the stipend, they can only give us money that is in the bill rate. So if they've maxed out the money from the bill rate, then there's no more money. So they can't max those out. It's like amazing when they're able to, but that's not going to be the norm. So just keep that in mind. Medical benefits, like I said, do you have your own? And if you do, you might want to talk to companies that will pay you some more money per hour because you have your own medical benefit. Housing, you want to think about if you're taking theirs. And if you are, you need to ask them the questions, what will that look like? Because if they are putting you in like a gated community, well, that sounds great, but it's probably going to affect your take-home money because they're still taking that money out of your coffee. They're just doing the work of finding the housing for you. Or do they put you in like a budget accommodation or a long extended stay, which could be cheaper, so not as fun to stay at, but maybe you'll make more money on the other end. So those are conversations you'd have with the company before you signed on with them. License reimbursement. Now, this is important too. So let's say you finished your 13-week assignment, and so you're already licensed in California, and you already got paid from point A to point B to get there, and you love the job, so you say, cool, I'm going to stay for another 13 weeks. Remember that money was in your pot. It wasn't in theirs. So now all of a sudden there's a few $100s of a license reimbursement, and there's a few $100s at least of the travel from point A to point B that should go somewhere back to you. That's why people get extension bonuses. That's why on extensions, maybe they'll give them some paid time off, or they'll give them money to go to a CEU they want to go. And so you can help them decide where that money goes. They want to keep it tax-free. So CEUs and stuff like that can still be tax-free. Bonuses are not tax-free. But the worst thing is if they just don't give you anything for an extension, because where did that money go then? It just went into their profit margin, and they didn't share that extra profit margin with you. And then for guaranteed hours, just good to know that. Like, guaranteed hours are going to be different with each hospital you go to. So you want to look at your pay and have them write out for you what you're going to get if you're able to work the full 36. But if the contract says they're able to have call-off days where some weeks you might only get 30 hours or something way less, you want to look and see, well, what will my pay look like if they start calling me off of my guaranteed hours? So that way you know that you can survive and you don't get there and you're all of a sudden surprised that, whoa, this contract had way less guaranteed hours than I thought, and I'm not getting paid hardly anything out here. So really important to look at that. And then, of course, as always, know why you travel so you're not so wrapped up in this stuff that it becomes not fun. And so this is all really good to know, but the best thing is to just do the best you can, learn as you go, and have a great time with it. This travel thing is cool and fun, so don't get too wrapped up in all of this logistical stuff that you forget that, wow, like pinch me, I get paid to travel and see this world and this flexibility. So don't forget all the great stuff while we're figuring out all the trickier topics. Okay, so now you're really clear on how you like your coffee. Heck yeah, you can start interviewing companies and recruiters. So always good to work with at least 2 recruiters you trust in between each assignment. That's good for so many reasons, but keep in mind, this is how we have more opportunities. The different companies do have different jobs. Recruiters should be hustling a bit more to keep your attention if you're working with 2. So it's all about open communication. You don't want to trick them or pin them against each other, but just know that it's normal and it's the best option to work with at least 2 recruiters. So what is a recruiter's job? Different companies, it's going to be different. But at the core of it, they're the ones that are putting our profile together, our paperwork. They're developing a relationship and a bond with us and helping us navigate how this whole thing works. They'll be the ones on the computer, scanning jobs, searching jobs. So we're going to want someone that's like hustling, that knows what we want, that listens, that's keeping an eye on as these jobs come up. Because remember, man, it's fast moving, guys. And so a job can pop up and then be gone in like half of a day, no problem. So if these recruiters aren't like on it like crazy for us when we need them to be, we can miss opportunities. Moving quickly to get us submitted. That's why it's important for us to have current paperwork in with companies we know we want to work with. Because if a job comes up, we want them to get to us really quickly. We want to find out about the pay, the benefits, make sure it sounds like it could be a good fit. And then we want to quickly get submitted. They're going to help us with the arrangements like our housing, the drug screens, the physicals. They're going to be negotiating with us. Yes, negotiating is a part of this industry, so don't be afraid of it. And they'll be our go-to. They're our rock. Anytime something comes up, we should always feel confident calling the recruiter. They become a bit like a friend to us. Like, we're on this unknown road. We're communicating to them what we need, what we want, how the interview went, what we're worried about. And when we get there, we want to update them. Here's how our housing is. Things are good. Tell them about the first date. So they should be writing us on the first day of our job, writing us when we get to our housing, making sure things are flowing well with us. That is what a good recruiter does. Payroll should be on time. If they don't, we should be able to call our recruiter and say, hey, like, nothing came in on Friday. What happened? They should be keeping an eye on our expiration dates. Oh, your TV is about to expire. And then that emotional need of the traveler. There are days that we feel really lonely, that we had a horrible day at the hospital, that our manager was so mean to us. And they should also be someone that we can call and just be like, things are kind of tough. And so they have this kind of shoulder to talk to. Ends up being this recruiter's job as well. So the good ones. So with Nomadicare, which is the passion project I have, I interview recruiters all the time, multiple a week. And only 1 in 4 actually end up making my list that I would ever match a traveler to. But these are kind of the things that I'm looking for. So one, I want them to be friendly and confident. But I really care about those soft skills, like the kindness, the active listening. Someone that feels like a friend. Like, there are people that you talk to on the phone, and after the first conversation, you're like, would be happy to talk to them again. So I'm looking for kind of like that tone of voice and that kindness. And when I'm talking, I don't feel like they're being pushy or they're annoyed at the time I'm taking up. If I ask a question, they're answering it fully. So it's kind of this thing like they talk to me like how they'd want their sister to be treated. That's kind of what I look for. It goes right into this honest and transparent thing too. So I'll test them a lot on their knowledge. Like, do they understand tax homes? Do they know how to break down pay? Do they understand what we go through and what it means to be a good recruiter? And it's one thing to understand that in your brain. It's a whole nother thing to be dedicated to educating every traveler through that. And so what I'm looking for is, like, if their best friend or their sister was going into this industry, they would make sure that that person understood their tax homes and understood how to pack or what to ask on an interview. And they would definitely be calling on the first day, like, how was the job? And so that's how I'd want them to treat any traveler that I connect them with, because I know the travelers that come through Nomadicare are usually in their first year or two. And so they need more of that. I needed more of that. I needed a recruiter that had my back, that would call me on my first day. I wanted it. It made it more fun for me. So I'm looking for that. Responsiveness is huge. It's shocking to me how many times I get the complaint that recruiters in general, like, didn't answer for a few days. Like, that's not acceptable. The great recruiters, especially if you really need something, will be there in an hour or two, at least responding. Like, hey, like, I have this meeting. This is when I'll get back to you. And definitely within a day. So know that that is normal, and that's their job, and that's what you can expect. Doing what they say they're going to do. They need to care about your why. Just like you need to care about your why, they need to as well. That's the only way when they're looking through their thousands and thousands of jobs that they're scanning on their computer, they know the ones that fit you. They already know what kind of town you like. They know what makes you comfortable. They know what makes you tick and why you're even doing this, like, fun, crazy journey of traveling. They need to ask you that, and they need to care about it and keep it at the forefront of their mind when they're looking for your next job. And then non-pushy, we are absolutely past the days of sales tactics, of used car salesmen. What I love is the new way of sales is about transparency. It's about just being open and honest and being yourself. So I'm looking for people that embrace that honesty and transparency and friendliness as their way of being a salesperson and as their way of being a recruiter, rather than the tactics of, like, this job is closing, you need to decide today, and making you feel really anxious. That definitely does not work anymore. Not jealous. So just remembering they're not your lover. Like, yes, it can, like, they do a lot of work, and there's a mutual respect that needs to happen. But at the end of the day, this is business, and we are out there, like, bouncing around, and trying to make good money in these unpredictable situations, and we need the job that we want and need. And if they don't have it, then of course we're going to be talking to other companies. There's hundreds out there. And so it's crazy to me. I understand that the recruiters would love us to only talk to them, but it's crazy to me if they're actually making you feel guilty for talking to another company. That absolutely is not okay. And it shows straight away they're not actually caring about your best interest. They're caring about their bottom line. And then going the extra mile. So I just look for like the ones that like to have fun with it, that have the passion, that really like their job, because naturally they're going to do things that are funny. So those are what I look for. And so those are the things I'd encourage you to look for when you're interviewing, because they are out there. And yes, they're not 100% in abundance, but they are out there. And if you only interview one or two and you end up settling, it's going to affect your whole entire travel journey, because they end up being behind every single thing we do. And in my 6 years of traveling, I have had amazing recruiters, and it made a complete difference. And there was a year that I had recruiters that really were not as good, and that was the year I thought about leaving the industry. So they make a huge difference. So I would take the time needed to find the ones that you know you want to stick with for the long haul. What are the recruiter red flags? So if they submit you to a job without your approval, that is never, ever okay. I don't understand this at all. Submitting to a job means giving our personal information, our resume, to a job for us to interview for it before we have told them we even want to interview for the job. And I'll also clarify here, when they tell you about a job, unless otherwise determined, like you know it is such a hard place to find a job, so you tell one recruiter, okay, if something opens up in San Diego, like you just put my resume in, we'll figure out pay later. That's the rare part, and that's an explicit yes early on. And that means I would have chosen one company to do that for me, because you can't choose two companies to do that for you, because then you could get double submitted. And a lot of times if a hospital or a clinic gets two resumes of the same person from two different companies, it makes you look a little bit less stable. And they might just throw it out altogether because they don't want to deal with the drama of having to go between two companies. Now, not always. Like, it's not like it's impossible for you to get a job if you're double submitted, but that's what they say. It makes it harder. And so you want to make sure you're explicit with every recruiter. Do not ever submit my personal information to a job until we've gone over pay, until you've told me everything you know. I've had my chance to do a little bit of research, and I've said, yes, I want to interview. Not answering questions before they get your resume. It's a big red flag if the recruiter's not even taking the time to see if it's a good fit. Think about all the different needs that you might have with your medical insurance, where you want to go, when you want to go, what you're looking for, 401k, all these different benefits. You should absolutely be able to have this kind of like coffee date conversation or two, talking about what you're looking for, what you need, talking about why you want to travel, why it's exciting, what you're nervous about, just like you would on a coffee date, to see if it's even a good fit before you need to give them your personal information. And so if they're pushing you for that, or saying like, well, why don't you give me your resume and then we'll talk about this? Well, it feels like then they're not really being a recruiter from their heart. They're being a recruiter for their boss and doing the things that will get them a pat on their back from the boss. But that's not who I want to work for. If they're offering you these very low taxable wages and they're not telling you the downsides, I think it's important for them to clearly let you know, like, if you do this, you might not get approved for loans, and like just giving you the full picture and not only telling you the upsides of everything just to get you to say yes. They're pitching you jobs that are just so way off base from what you want. Like, I love recruiters that will hustle and give me suggestions of things I might not have thought about. Like, some of my favorite assignments were jobs I didn't ask for explicitly, and they were like, well, I know you're looking for like a city and coffee. Like, have you ever thought about this town? And I'd Google it and be like, whoa, that town looks really cute. That I like. But the only reason they were able to do that is because they knew my why. So they could find things outside the box. But if they knew I was looking for like city and action, and I, had already done 2 small city assignments, well then, I expect them to be pitching me jobs that are worth my time because they listen to me and ask me good questions. If they're not able to explain what a tax home is, which I can almost guarantee you, because you listen to this webinar, you're going to know more than most recruiters know about tax homes. It is sadly an area they are well undereducated on. But regardless, if they're lying to you, if they're not able to say they don't know, if they're not able to send you to a better resource to help you know this, that's not good, because a tax home is actually really crucial for us to know, because as you can see, if we have a tax home, we can get tax-free money. If we don't, we can't. So for them to not have any clue, or to tell us things like, just 50 miles is fine, you can live at your mom's house, that's not good. It means they haven't gone above and beyond. They're not really knowing the basics of what they need to know to guide us. If they only give us a blended pay rate, so some companies or some recruiters will just give you this one big number per week. Well, then we can't see transparently how our pay is being broken down, right? And if we're going to have an extension, I want that. I want to be able to look at that clearly and see, what did my license cost? How much did I get from travel from point A to point B? These different things, so I know how much money goes back into my pot for an extension. And I also just want it for my own knowledge of how much am I getting for my stipends. Make sure they're not overmaxing those out. I want them to be transparent with my pay and not just give me one big rate. If they're withholding information until after I submit, so that's a tricky move. If they are telling you that you have to submit to a job before they'll tell you how much you can get paid, that's a huge red flag. If they make you feel guilty for talking to other recruiters or asking a lot of questions or negotiating your pay, red flag. And if they just go MIA when you start your job, so they're like hustling for you, they're friendly, and all of a sudden you get a job and you don't hear from them until, guess what, like 3 weeks before your assignment's over, when it's time to interview again, you can tell they don't really care about your journey. They're just doing the bare minimum to get you into the next job. There are recruiters that will actually build a relationship with you, stay with you on the journey, and be with you for those ups and downs. So there's different ways to find a recruiter if you don't have one. There are these websites that are called lead generation websites. Now, if you sign up for one of these, and they're kind of tricky, you can't always even tell. Like, sometimes you have to go into their terms of use and see. It says, if you fill this out, it'll send them to every company that pays them money to get these names. So you could sign up, and all I could say at the top is like, interested in travel nursing. And you sign up, and all of a sudden, your phone number is like blown out to 60 different companies, and your email and like your number and your texting will go off for months and months and months and months. So that is typically a mistake that people don't make twice, because we like our privacy, and it's insane to have that many companies calling us. And it's not usually the best recruiters that are calling us, because they're usually the new recruiters that the companies are like breaking them in by doing the cold calls. It's not fun. So be careful of the lead generation sites. It's not the best way to find a recruiter by any means. You can cold call companies yourself. So you can like look up lists of different companies and just start cold calling them, and then ask them, the companies about the questions about the benefits you need. So you can start narrowing down your list of what company you know has the benefits you want. You can get a recommendation from someone you trust. And why that's good is because if you I actually don't like this about the system at all. If I cold called a company, and I knew the company was a company I wanted to work for, but the recruiter that answered the phone was a recruiter I didn't mesh well with. I could just tell, like, they were really direct. I felt pushed by them. I could tell that they were annoyed, like they were too busy, whatever it is. Once I'm in the system of that company under that recruiter's name, they have these rules that other recruiters can't try to snatch you away. So because of that, it's really hard then to switch recruiters within a company for fear of hurt feelings within that company and because of their policy. And so that's too bad, because you could have a company you really like, and now you're stuck with this recruiter without having to go way up the chain and make it awkward to get a new one. So that's why I kind of don't like the cold call companies, which is unfortunate. I wish that companies had a better way to navigate that, so you could kind of have more choice in who your personality match was with the recruiter. You could get a recommendation from someone you trust. So if you know travelers out there that you trust, like me, like your friends, like someone who you know have done it, who care about this industry a lot, ask them who's doing a great job that you can trust. And that is a great way to get in with a good recruiter from the get-go. So you can be in the system under someone that at least a traveler who's done it for a long time says, like, yeah, like they're doing things right. Because it is really easy when you're just getting started to not know it all, and you shouldn't know it all. Like, it took me years and years to even know what I know now. So of course you don't know all this starting out, but you would hate for that to paralyze you so you never start. And then Nomadicare is my passion project. So if you filled that out, you get matched with just 2 recruiters that have gone through my interview process, my vetting process. So that means all these things I've talked about, I've already interviewed them on, I've asked them the hard questions, and like I said, like most people don't make that list. And so I take it very seriously. And then what's cool is there's a feedback loop, and so I want the feedback from the travelers, and so the recruiters don't necessarily stay on the list if they're not upholding what they said they would in the interview and what they, what I believed in them. Then they just come off the list. And so the list keeps getting better and better as I get feedback. So I'm really excited about that because it is a great way for new travelers to not have to go through all of this and have a good starting point for someone who is promising to pay well, who knows about tax homes, who cares, who's funny. So you always can go to nomadicare.com. There's just a form on there. And I think I even have that. Let's see. Okay, so let me know if you can see that. But that link right there takes you to the spot on the webpage to fill that out. And so that's how you can get matched with just 2 recruiters that I trust. And then the other thing you can do is if you are someone who has traveled for a while and you hear all of this and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm lucky, like my recruiter has all these qualities, you can also tell your recruiter about Nomadicare because they can interview with me. A lot of times that's how I end up finding like these dream recruiters is from other travelers who are like, yeah, interview this person, like they're doing a great job. So you can either sign up to get 2 matches from recruiters, or you can refer your awesome recruiter to Nomadicare so they can get interviewed and have a way to get matched with other great travelers. Okay, so that is the webinar.